This is Cynthia Sue Larson with RealityShifters.com, talking with you today about a whole new worldview, thanks to UFOs. My book that I'm holding is written by Paula Harris, Paula Leopezi Harris. It's called Connecting the Dots, Making Sense of the UFO Phenomena. And it's got a foreword by Leo Sprinkle. This book, as you can see, I've been putting lots of little post-its on all these little tagged areas, lots of places that are worth lots of further investigation. And what I'd like to do today is share with you some of the insights from the book and thoughts about where it's leading us, this whole idea of disclosure that's been coming up in the news recently, the last year or two. Now, Paula Harris has been documenting and investigating and researching this phenomenon, this topic, for decades. She originally was doing journalism and investigative journalism and was called in to cover some of the reporting about the UFOs out in Area 51. So she did the famous interview that a lot of people know about with Colonel Corso. That's Colonel Philip Corso. And she describes that in this book. She talks about how she had a meeting with Corso. And this is where things get really interesting. Now, Paula Harris, of course, she really started off investigating this area, wanting to know about the nitty-gritty, what most people want to know about, the nuts and bolts, the physical evidence, that kind of thing. So when she started out interviewing people decades ago, including Philip Corso, that was definitely on her mind, but lots more came through than just the nuts and bolts. Let me give you an idea of what that's like. So I'm going to just read something here. So this is when Harris was inquiring, she's talking with with Colonel Corso about a meeting he once had at the Trinity site where a ship kept appearing and disappearing. It was like there and then it wasn't there. So Corso approached the vessel when it was looking solid, and it was a hot day. It was about 110 degrees Fahrenheit in the sun. Yet the physical ship was as cool as ice, is what he said, right there in the desert near the Trinity site. Corso then conversed with a being that had a glass helmet on with a silverish band and a red jewel or sensor in the middle, and he asked Corso to come aboard. And this is where I'm going to quote what Corso said to Paula Harris. Here's what Corso said. "I know what you have done to my people," is what he said to the being. And then, like a human, I asked him, "What can you offer me?" He said, "A new world, if you can take it." Then he asked me to shut down my radar for 10 minutes. I said to myself, if I shut my radar down, 10 minutes could be an eternity. How did that thing know that I was the only man that could give that order? So that gives it a bit of an insight about telepathy, material science being different. I'm now going to jump from the interview that Harris did with Colonel Corso to Zecharia Sitchin, because she interviews a whole bunch of people, she has for decades, and she's bringing all these little gems and pearls together in one place. So this next little vignette is going to show learning from the past. Harris shared evidence that humans have interacted with UFOs, such as what Zecharia Sitchin talks about. And he's described how ancient Sumerians wrote the story of mankind on clay tablets some 6,000 years ago, showing they knew the sun was the center of our solar system, and they knew about planets such as Pluto that have only recently in the last couple of centuries been detected by modern scientists. Evidence showing that nuclear weapons were deployed in the year 2024 BC raises questions that Zecharia Sitchin was asking, such as, now here's Zecharia. He says, is man born a warrior, or did someone teach us to make war? The answer is the latter. Before the wars of man, there were the wars of the gods. Specifically, it was during the conflict between Horus and Seth, according to unambiguous Egyptian texts, that humans were given arms and enlisted to fight on the side of Horus at that time. And so it was that the conflict between the two clans of Anunnaki, nuclear weapons were used to wipe out the spaceport in the Sinai, an event reflected in the biblical tale of Sodom and Gomorrah. There was, before that, an international war related to the spaceport, the so-called War of the Kings in Genesis chapter 14. The nuclear cloud from the explosion in the Sinai was carried by the winds eastward in Mesopotamia, and numerous lamentation texts describe how the evil wind, the nuclear cloud, killed all life in Sumer. Now I'm going to jump again. I'm just going to be sharing some of these insights so we can think about it. So now we've had, so far, in this little video, we've had Colonel Corso talking with a being who says, I'm offering a new world if you can take it. Next, we're jumping back in time to the year 2024 BC with lots of clear evidence that there was some sort of a nuclear battle that went on long before humans had our world wars. Next, I'm going to take a jump into an awakening of our soul's purpose. And this is an interview that Paula Harris had with Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who did write the foreword for this book, Connecting the Dots. Dr. Leo Sprinkle captures some of the feeling that many of us, myself included, have when we witness UFOs. I have done that. And we have experiences with interdimensional beings in the sky, in our dreams, and in our daydreams. Sprinkle points out that these interactions influence on two levels, as individuals, and then there's a societal level. And then Sprinkle goes on to say, many people go through this fear and this doubt because not only are they coming in contact with extraterrestrials, which is a shock, but also they're coming in contact with their own soul's purpose, which is a bear. It's beastly to know that we're here for a high purpose to help ourselves, to help humanity get through this stage in which the Earth is going through some changes. Humanity itself is going through some changes. The outcome, if it's successful, could lead into our being inducted into a confederation of civilizations of other cultures. Okay, now we can think about that. A confederation, what would that be like? Well, Dr. Stephen Greer has some ideas here, and he approaches this topic of government knowledge, disclosure, and so forth with delicate diplomacy when Paula Harris inquires whether there is a cosmic federation. So she's now asking Dr. Greer, is there a cosmic federation which has established relations with certain government leaders requesting to be here on Earth? And here is what Dr. Stephen Greer had to say. This is a subject which must be approached with caution. I believe that there were meetings similar to what you describe, but we subsequently betrayed the ETs. And that's not all. The so-called Extraterrestrial Federation was and is being targeted by bombs and weapons used to track them down and kill them. Basically, if we believe that ETs are collaborating with the military, it's because the military has craft similar to alien craft. In other words, reverse engineered. And to add to this conversation, Paula talks with Sergeant Clifford Stone. Now, he shared insights gleaned from meeting extraterrestrials, where he indicated there are at least 57 different races that have been identified. He then pointed out that governments are focused on national security, military applications, and new technology, with everything else being secondary. Paula Harris replied, in other words, the government gets everything it can out of this contact. In the meantime, no one worries about interior development or the spiritual side of the UFO presence. To which Stone replied, absolutely, they don't give it a thought. But in reality, the spiritual aspect of the UFO phenomenon must be given the utmost consideration. Now this brings us to some interesting pivotal moments and meaningful coincidences which actually run throughout this whole book, Connecting the Dots. Paula Harris describes a whole bunch of these that highlight the deeply interconnected nature of the phenomenon that operates much more deeply than at just a surface level. Harris specifically notes the August 1987 harmonic convergence. And that was, if you remember that, going back that far, Jose Arguelles was orchestrating that at the time, and it was in accordance with some ancient prophecies, long prophesied transformational times, which hopefully, ideally, would lead to positive transformation for humans and for the Earth going forward. And that is where I want to pause for a minute and not talk so much anymore about this book, which is absolutely wonderful, quite a tour de force. But I had a very interesting experience in 1987 after the harmonic convergence, which I did not at the time really participate in consciously. I was alive at that time, and I was a young woman just involved in my daily life, going to school, going to graduate school.
And what happened next is very interesting because I experienced in a series of lucid dreams that every night I would fall asleep. This went on for 2 or 3 weeks. I'd fall asleep, having worked a very long, hard day. At that time, I was working at Citibank as a project manager. So I had a very long days, usually 10-hour days. And I'd fall asleep at night. And the first time I woke up, and it was a lucid dream, and I met a very tall humanoid being who invited me to basically participate in what turned out to be a job interview for a job I didn't apply for. He just basically asked me to please select what looked like a head of lettuce for my produce stand, pick the best one. And so I just could feel the best energy from this particular head of lettuce, I indicated that's the one. He nodded and said, good, come with me. And then I joined him in this large kind of a conference room. It was more like it was where you'd go to hear a talk, a presentation, kind of like I was going to classes by day, and we'd be in a large room. It was like that, lots of seating. People were already there. They were seated, and I sat down, and it looked like there were beings, basically interdimensional extraterrestrial beings is what it looked like to me. I didn't pay much attention to that. I was paying attention to what's going on here. And it was the Global Human Mind Redesign Project that I was joining as quality assurance. And so I learned what the objectives and the goals of the project were. Basically, that this would be a transformational time on the earth, and that humans, we have some advantages with the kind of minds, not brains, but minds that we have. We have great creativity, and the goal of this project was to hold on to, and perhaps enhance the creativity, at the same time enhancing the ability to be empathetic and be aware of how others are feeling and thinking. Shared awareness, if you will, more what you might call intuition on a collective level. And so this was the goal, and to do it without going crazy. And that's where I was coming in, because my job was to review the teams that would then present their offerings to go forward with some improved mind designs for humans, and then I would test them out and basically give like a thumbs up or a thumbs down, go or no go, pass or fail, veto power. And so that's what I was learning how to do, and it started off well enough. I was getting some designs that I thought were quite good. They did seem like they encouraged creativity with alongside empathy, intuition, having that shared sense of collaboration with others built right in, and a deep wisdom, this intuitive knowing, all of that good stuff. And so it's all started off well, and my job was then to present the good news or the bad news to the team in question. So when it was good news, I just feel really good about that. Those are the types of beings I'd want to hang out with. When it came to the bad news, and these were fails, that was not so much fun, because I was also supposed to report why I was saying that this particular design did not work. Why did it lead to insanity, depression, and so forth? And so I'd have to give that bad news too. And those beings were not the kind of beings that I felt comfortable with. They looked like, in some cases, like a reptilian or an insect. Some of them were at war with others, which I didn't understand why that would be if they're helping humanity with this global mind redesign. Why would they be fighting each other? So it was strange. But my insights and input were all relayed telepathically. I didn't need to learn any new languages or anything. And I felt afterwards like it had gone pretty well. Now later, I learned that there was such a thing as indigo kids, these children that were being born with a deep sense of knowingness, crystal kids, rainbow kids. This was a generation of children being born in the late 80s, early 90s, and so forth. They are now young adults. Sometimes we call them star seeds now. They're capable of making the most of these transformational times. And so, with insights into all of this, I just want to share the idea that if you're interested, first of all, in finding out what do all the decades of research from some of the top researchers in the field have to say about what's going on, why is it happening, what does it mean, what does it suggest? this would be the book I'd recommend as a go-to book, Connecting the Dots by Paula Harris. And then to summarize it, I just say that it looks like we're expanding our worldview. And it looks like we are tapping into not just a desire and a hunger for new technologies and reverse engineering things, although that might be fun and there's probably lots we could learn. But hopefully we can learn also that in the past, some of the technologies have been used for what purposes may not have been the best. And it might be better for humanity at this time to get the benefits of that global human mind redesign project I was part of, and really recognize, even if we weren't born in those years, we can totally tap into the awareness of sharing a collaborative sense of intuitive knowingness, kindness, and love. That ideas, they have a reality to them, that we can bring them into our heart, into our minds, and we can choose the kind of future that we're creating together in our own personal lives and collectively. And that was a big message from these UFO experiences. They are very meaningful on a personal level, as well as having a collective depth to them and insights. It's going to be up to us humans, to, it's our new world for the taking, if we're ready for it. And so we can do what it takes to be ready for it. Something else I want to tell you about is that if you check out the StarWorks USA website, there are events happening there. Paula Harris is kind enough to be coordinating a whole bunch of excellent events coming up. I'll be part of one in Crestone, Colorado in May of 2024. So if that's still ahead of things right now, then feel free to check it out at the StarWorks USA website and find out all about it. It should be a lot of fun. It'll be like a retreat. It'll be a workshop, but it'll be an opportunity to connect with others, to learn about what are these great revelations that are coming through each and every one of us, and collectively, what can we be doing to make the best lives for ourselves and for all of us in the world. In other words, how good can it get, not just for me, but for you and for everyone and for all it is. So until next time, that's the question I'd love to have you keep asking. How good can it get? This is Cynthia Sue Larson with RealityShifters.com. Love you so much.